People who made a marriage pact with someone like, if we're both single by the time we're 40, let's get married, and went through with it. How did it go? My friend and I got drunk one night and said if we're single in 5 years let's get married. 5 years later we got married, dated for 2 years before that. Just celebrated our 5th wedding anniversary and have a baby girl and an amazing life. Best friends since we were really young. Always had crushes on each other off and on. In high school. Our timing was awful and we never ended up dating, but we did make a marriage pact. If we were both single at 30 years old, we'd getting married. Some years passed. We moved away from each other. Grew distant. Dated other people. Long story short, we're now back in each other's lives and I'm reasonably sure we're going to make good on the pact earlier than originally anticipated. When we were 25, one of my best friends and I decided that at 35 we'd get married if we were still single. She moved back to the same town I lived in a year later and I realized I loved her too much to wait until 35. Been together 2 years now. We're getting married next week. I had an uncle who did this with a girl for when they turned 35. They turned 35 and laughed it off but ended up dating instead. Few years later they got married. Semicolon. I think most who do it are already interested in the other. They just don't want to admit it yet. Edit. Since this got a ton of response, I asked my uncle's wife for the full story. They were both amused. And my uncle also texted the family group chat to brag they were Reddit famous, which led to many middle-aged people confused about what Reddit was. Anyways, they made the deal in college. They barely kept in touch after college. However, she moved back to the city and met back up through old friends. That's when they began to get closer and joke about the whole 35 thing once more. For his birthday, instead of having party, he just invited her out for dinner. Which led her to joke, "Oh, are you going to propose?" And they laughed. But during dinner they started discussing what it would look like if they started dating. Within the month they began. I made this pact with my best friend in high school. Several years down the road we ended up being together, but long before the time frame was up. We will be married next year. My wife said she made this pact with a guy who took it seriously, I guess. We went to high school together, so I know of him, and he randomly calls 10 years later and asked my wife if she is still with me. She said yes and he hung up and we haven't heard since, lol. I made a baby pact with a friend, i.e. if I hit a certain age that I now can't remember he would impregnate me. I knew we wouldn't be good together romantically, but he was a solid best friend and would have been a great dad. It was also a safety net for me that helped me leave an abusive relationship. I had been convinced that no one else would ever love me and I'd never be a mum. Anyway, he ended up introducing me to my now husband, who I have a child with, while he is married to someone far better suited to his personality than me. So I'd say it worked out for the best for everyone. I've made a pact with 2 people and neither of them know. My best friend growing up and I made this pact. We were 13-14 at the time. The pact was if we didn't marry anyone by 30, we would marry each other. A few years later, we moved it to 25. By the time we were 19-20 we started dating. We got married at 22. Just celebrated our 3rd anniversary. Edit. Holy. I had push notifications turned off. Had zero idea this post was doing so well. Just to add to my little story, we actually have known each other since we were at least 4. There's video and pictures of us at a 5th birthday party at Putt Putt. He's gay now. Always has been. Had this happen with a best friend of mine. She said if both of us were single at 35, we'd get married to each other. 2 years later, I ask her out. She is taken aback. Ghosts me for a year, then invites me to her wedding. I had no hard feelings, so went anyways. Made this agreement at 16 to marry at 35. We started dating at 26. And it'll be 2 years next week. She wants to get married a little earlier than 35 now. I, now, late 30 SF, made a joke marriage pact with a gay male friend back in 1999 or so before gay marriage was legal. Promised to marry before 40. We both got married this year. To different men with the same first name. So, not quite what was asked, but we're amused. When I was a sophomore, I made that exact pact with a woman who I was casually dating. She was a gorgeous, tall redhead with a tendency to be overdramatic. She was the first woman who I was ever obsessed with in my adult life. We actually wrote up the pact, signed it and got someone in our dorm to act as our witness. Several years after graduation, brought it up to her when we met for a drink and she said she'd never speak to me if I ever mentioned it again. When I ran into her during a college reunion last year, I realized that I no longer had any feelings for her whatsoever, which was a pleasant surprise. During the pandemic, I was going through some old papers and found the pact. I find this frequently asked question fascinating because until I encountered Reddit, I had never heard of this practice. Yeah. We made a pact when we were 18 to get married if we were both single at 30. We were not dating. Jumped the gun a bit I suppose. And married at 24 years old. 7 years and 5 kids later and I don't regret it one bit. We're married with a newborn. When we were both 19 when we made a pact to marry each other at 35 if we're both single. We started dating at 24. Married at 29. And now with a newborn at 31. I made a marriage pact with a friend when we were 10. If neither of us were married by 25, we would get hitched. She became a massive drug addict. And I'm dating someone much better. So bullet dodged. I did this with a friend when I was in my late teens early 20s. We said we would get married at 30. She was gay. I was straight. I moved for university and we saw each other less and less and eventually drifted apart. I don't go back to my hometown very often. But the last I heard, about 8 or 9 years ago, she had become a nurse, found a husband and had a kid. I'm 36 now and I don't feel like I have grown up one iota and I haven't had a relationship that has lasted longer than 3 months. I try not to measure my life against the traditional metrics of marriage, money and kids. But I sometimes feel like I have done things very wrong. I turn 40 next year. She's a few years younger than me. We fooled around a ton years ago. She's now into anti-vax crap and proudly vegan. I have no problem with being vegan. But the conspiracy stuff and the anti-vax stuff is so baffling. Had she not suddenly turned that way I wouldn't doubt we would give it another try. We loved each other and were best friends. Something just changed in her life where she just drifted into ideas and beliefs I cannot get behind or live with. It sucks and wish it never happened because I still have feelings for her. But I could never live with a partner believing that stuff. Had it been different I'd be asking her to marry me in December. I can only attest to the first part. But I still find it a funny story. A friend of mine about 10 years ago, whilst in a group setting said something along the lines of we should get married if we're still both single when we're 40. Number 50. Number 60. Number 70. And we'd have to live in separate houses. Capital K. Only 39 years to go I guess. When I was about 17 I used to always hang with the girl down the road from my parents' house. One night she told me she wants to marry me no matter what when she turns 40. Even if she is already married. Over the next few years we gradually hung out less as we got older. She died in a car accident when she was about 20 years old. I've made a pact like this recently but I can't remember what year we said we'd get together. You'd better get that in writing, son. Not a marriage pact. But we agreed we would become roommates if we were still living at home at a certain age. I can't remember exactly how old exactly it was. But doesn't matter because we're now married with children. Ted Mosby is typing. I turn 40 this weekend. And have been divorced from the person I made the pact with for 7 years. A friend and I made a similar pact when we were like 17 and the marriage age was 25, because idiot teens feel like that's forever away. When 25 rolled around we were like LMAO, that was stupid of us, and continued as we were. He's married now. I'm with a cool partner but no plans for marriage yet. Editing to add. Neither of us were ever romantically involved and just like solid besties. She found a cool boyfriend and I found a cool girlfriend. We never talk about it because we never took it seriously. We have a joke pact, 35. I think. Comma, and also an elaborate ridiculous story about being each other's second spouse because of natural causes but also unnatural causes for some. Like he marries his crazy as hell old flame. But I kill her somehow because she's awful. And who has kids and yada yada. It's a whole ridiculous thing by now. We've been BFFs for 13 plus years. And it only gets more ridiculous as time goes on. My boyfriend, of 5 years, thinks it's hilarious. The three of us have been on a vacation together. Planning an international trip for when COVID ends. Etc. I'm so thankful they get along so well. Edit. There were other people on the vacation. And other people planning the international trip as well. He's married with a newborn and building his dream house. Mine died. Got married before 40. To different people. We're definitely soulmates. But still want to have some fun before we get into our 30s. She called me about a year ago this time asking if I would like to try smoking meth with her. Blocked her number and off all social media. Oh well. Has anyone actually followed through on a pact without dating marrying ahead of time? I guess people who make these kinds of pacts are very good friends. If not best friends. And they are probably afraid to consider a love relationship because if they break up it could ruin their precious friendship. It's understandable, been there. And at the same time it's a bit silly. Marrying your best friend is actually a great thing and it is one of the keys to maintain and preserve love between two people on the long run. In other words, your partner should first be your best friend. I was 16 or 17 when a friend and I made the pact to marry by 30. I forgot that he was already well into his 20s at the time and he contacted me when I was only 24 to ask about the pact. He had just gotten out of a bad relationship and I just got into a serious one. I just celebrated my 5th anniversary with the same person but my friend and I still talk sometimes. Turns out he has a bunch of health issues and is always in and out of the hospital. I think the main issue is his heart but I think it might be because he never really took care of himself when he was younger. He also has weird political views and even when things get heated we go out of our way to acknowledge that we have opposing opinions but are still friends. My wife and I did. Freshman year of high school. If we weren't married by 30 then we'd get married. We didn't start dating until 4 years after high school. We forgot about the pact. Lo and behold. I proposed 8 years after we started dating and we were married at the age of 30. It must have been fate. She is my soulmate. She got my mama pregnant. This phrase severely confuses me. I believe it's pregnant. One of my best friends and I, both girls, made this pact but she also made one with another friend that was sooner than ours. We're intended to get married at 32. Lost touch. She wrote me a message at 36. Both single. Got back in touch. Now we sometimes chat. But that is as far as it goes. If we were meant to be, we would have married at 32. My first serious boyfriend when I was 17 to 18. We broke up but remained good friends. When I was around 20, we discussed that we would marry at 40 if we were still single. All our friends rooted for us ending up together. As we just vibed really well and were solid friends. About 5 years later he got married. Blocked me on everything. And never spoke to me again. So I think the pact is off. Lol. How depressing. Hey, you're cool. But only as a last resort. I did this with one of my best friends from middle school high school. He was also my first kiss. He's in the Marines. We both ended up dating other people. He's now miserably married and has 2 kids with his wife, who hates me, and we haven't been allowed to speak for over a year, per her request, because he called me drunk one night and told me he still loves me and he thinks he married the wrong person. Nothing says romance quite like saying I'll settle for you. Just in this thread to see what my life could be like in 14 years. I'm 32, so we still have 8 more years. I made the pact with my beat friend quite a few years ago. But now I'm happily married to someone else and that best friend is more of a sister to me now. So it'd be weird. I'll just put out there that I did in fact suggest this to my best friend from college. We did not, however, go through with it because as soon as I suggested it she gradually stopped talking to me. I played it off as a joke even though I completely meant it, lol. Haven't heard from her in months. Wait. You guys know other people? Not me. But one of my high school friends, bride, got married a few years ago. We were seated at a table with the groom's high school and college friends. 2 of them were girls he knew in high school. One of the girls was there with her BF. We were all talking about the bride and groom. And the girl with the boyfriend tells us how her and the groom had a marriage pact for when they turned 30. Bride and groom were around 27. The way she said it was so awkward. There was no part of her story that was like OMG that was ridiculous, I'm so happy for him, I love the bride. Just haha, look where we are now. It was bizarre. As we were getting to know each other her BF had mentioned that he was moving from NC to MD to be with his girlfriend. When he got up to get drinks she said something about not knowing if she even liked him. I don't recall but it was cringe. Made a pact to get married when we were 17 to be married at age 30. At 30 both of us were single. So we got married. It's benign horrible. And I'm not even gay so the SX sucks. 5 years ago I made a pact with my cat Butters. It is a non-SL relationship but we agreed if neither of us found a significant other in 5 years, we would become life partners. It has really worked out during this COVID-19 stay home stuff. We have bonded well during these trying times.